So now the second part of the presentation is about the tips, the 3 tips which I can share quickly based on what we have seen, where professionals take time to upskill and where they face those roadblocks when they get into the industry. The first tip is to master the application of data science. So people focus a lot on techniques, for instance, statistics, or say linear regression, logistic regression, decision trees, or deep learning. You need to understand which kind of problem is, say, linear or logistic regression relevant. How do you apply this to a business problem? How do you break down the business problem and apply it correctly? For example, which chart is relevant for this kind of a business insight? So that's where professionals usually struggle, because they master the techniques, the technical skills, but they are not very conversant with applying it to problems. If you take this example of an organization's goal being achieving revenue growth from existing customers by addressing customer attrition, if I take this as an example goal for an organization, how do you break this down into business questions so that you understand what really you're trying to answer? So the likely business questions could be: how many customers did I lose last month? Which geography and products lost the most? This addresses the customer attrition part to understand what is really happening. And then another question could be: why did we lose 10% of customers in product A? So that's again getting into finding the next level of insight. And another question could be: how many customers am I likely to lose next month in North America? A forward-looking question, but this is again a business question a product manager will be interested in. And so on. There are several other questions to address the revenue growth, but sticking on to this example, how do you translate these business questions into data questions? The first one could be translated as compute the percentage change in customer count month over month and pivot it across the columns of geography and products. You can see the language changing and you're getting into the variables and you're translating it. So this is something which the technology team will be very comfortable to implement. So you need to make that translation. And again, once you have an insight, translate it back to the user. So this question can be answered with a descriptive kind of insight. And the second and third questions, there are examples here. So you have, you need a diagnostic insight for this one. And this one is forward-looking and a predictive insight. So this is an example of how you apply the techniques, but start with the business problem. So the guideline is: understand the business problem, find out who your audience is, what are their business questions, and translate them into data questions. Find out the type of insights needed and gather all the data that you can collect and clean the data, analyze it, and qualify the insights to make sure they are actionable. And finally, present it to your audience in a language they understand and iterate on it. So this is the first tip. Number 2, there are several tools. People get hung up on tools, learning R or Python. What's more important is to master the techniques and the intuition behind them. And this is very closely related to applying it, but the emphasis is on techniques, not on tools. Why? The data and analytics tools landscape looks like this. There are thousands of tools, and many of these tools have already disappeared. So what's more important is the ability to learn a new tool. If you have mastered the techniques, learning a new tool for that particular technique is going to be very easy. So that's the second tip. Number 3, data is dirty when you talk about real world applications. You need to develop an ability to handle and be comfortable working with different types of data. So here's an insightful but a humorous quote. 80% of time is in typical projects is spent preparing the data, and rest 20% on complaining about it. So you need to, there are several techniques to gather, clean, and curate the data. That's very important. And a lot of people assume that, and particularly professionals who come into this role first time, they assume that someone else will come in and clean the data and give a structured, nice looking data set to them. That just won't happen. You'll have to plan this, develop the skill sets, and budget time for it. So that's the third tip. So just to recap, master the application of your the data science skills to business problems, to real world problems. Number 2, master the techniques, not so much, don't get hung up on the tools. And third, be prepared to clean, curate data, and be able to work with all kinds of data.